Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the VTEC Academy. You're about to get schooled. What I have right here is the transmission that's going to be going in that car. It is a TSX transmission that somebody has decided they needed to paint silver. I don't know if we'll be able to get that off before we install it, but what we're going to do is we're going to install this right here. This is a factory limited slip differential from Honda. It came out of one of the many SI transmissions I had in race cars. This is a torsion or torque sensing differential. Torsion is a brand name of, I forget the name of the company. And basically the way it works is there is a set of spider gears and worm gears inside of this that lock up when you're driving in a straight line, and when you're driving around a corner, it allows one wheel to turn faster than the other, but if one wheel starts slipping, it goes back and locks up again. So it works pretty good as an LSD, as long as you don't have too much horsepower. The other thing is you don't want to get one wheel up in the air, because if you do, that will freewheel that one wheel that's up in the air, so that can cause a bit of a problem. Anyway, there's a lot of companies that make torsion differentials. They're fairly standard. A lot of companies use them on their limited slip differentials in their cars because they're really well behaved on the street. Also, WaveTrack makes one and Quaife makes one. This particular one, like I said, came out of an SI. You can usually buy them new from Honda for, used to be able to buy them for about $700. I don't know what they are now. And that was from, websites like Honda Automotive Parts, the ones that, do like a 30% discount. From companies like WaveTrack and Quaife, they're, $900 to $1,200. And the other popular style differential you'll find are the clutch style ones. Those are generally a little bit more expensive than these torsons. But if you've got a high horsepower car, do a lot of road racing, I actually recommend those a little bit better. They're more adjustable. You can adjust how they lock up, and whether or not they lock up only one way, or they lock up one way and partially the other way, or lock up both ways totally. And by that I mean on downshifts as well. Anyway, this happened to be lying around, so we want to put it in so that when we take the car out to track, we'll have better traction. So we're going to start taking this transmission apart. We're going to start off taking off the shift mechanism. That's this right here. This, of course, is a 6-speed transmission, so you can see there is a reverse lockout solenoid that actually just comes off with the whole mechanism. Yep, retainer. This long slot right here was held in by this bolt. By the way, when you're doing a 5-speed or 6-speed conversion, this slot is actually longer on the 6-speed versions. So this piece would have to be either replaced or modified if, let's say, you're doing an RSX type S 5-speed to 6-speed modification. This is our countershaft speed sensor. We're going to take it off so we don't accidentally damage it. That little spacer is important that I just dropped on the ground. We don't want to ding this up, damage it when we're taking stuff apart. This small little spacer varies in size depending on whether or not, what transmission you're using. On this particular one, because of the size of the gear, that gives you the right clearance between the end of the sensor and third gear. On the Accord, it's actually slightly bigger. Next, this bolt right here actually retains the reverse gear shaft. So we need to pull that out. When we put it back together, we got to make sure we line it up properly so we can put this bolt back in. Okay? The shift forks are on rods that are underneath the case right here, and they slide up and down, and there's little detents that are here, and underneath this bolt is a spring and a small ball that sits in the detent. A little ball bearing, you don't want to lose that. The spring is actually inside the bolt right here. So that presses in there.
Because I'm gonna pull you pulling the last one out from the top. It hit me.
These are all the bolts that, if I recall correctly, prevent us from pulling the case off. Next, we need to take off the bolts that connect the two cases. Now, funny on these magnesium cases, and you may remember this from a different video, these bolts are all reverse thread. We have this little alignment dowel that's in the way of pulling this bolt out, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull that out. And I'm going to put it back into our shifter mechanism to kind of, that way I don't lose it. That way when I put it back together, it's already there. It's funny, I wonder if they made it out of magnesium because it's quieter. Because it is a TSX after all. So that's a good point. It is quiet. See all the Honda bond that they used to seal it last time. There's a circlip down here. If you look down in here, you can see it holds the end bearing that's on top. We're going to take a pair of pliers and spread that open. As we pry on it, we should be able to slip it up past the bearing. Well, we opened it up and it popped right off the bearing. So now we should just be able to lift the case right off. Alrighty, here we go. Well, that's our case. And now we got to disassemble everything so we can take the diff out. Got our case off. Now we have to start pulling everything apart. This is the reverse gear with its little bar it rides on. There's a couple of bolts here. This is the reversing mechanism, and basically what it does is it shifts the gear down so it engages these. So normally what happens is one spins one direction and drives the other one the opposite direction. When you add the third gear in here, this spins this gear in the opposite direction, which then spins this in the same direction, and that's how reverse works. And we should be able to just lift this right out of here. The only thing kind of in my way is the reverse light, but I think I can slide it by without messing with that. So grab it all in one, and wiggle it right out of there. All right, now for the differential. Oily. There we go. This is our differential. See in there, a little bit different than our Torsen limited slip differential. Next thing we need to do is take these bolts off, transfer the ring gear over to our LSD, drop it all back in. Next step is to transfer my ring gear from our regular diff to our torsion. So, okay, the next thing we need to do is transfer our ring gear from the stock differential to our limited slip differential. These things are torqued on about 90 foot-pounds, so I'm gonna need an impact driver to get it off. It seems to be laughing at our impact driver, so let's do plan B. I've made some aluminum jaws for my vise here. I'm gonna have to do that anyway when I had to torque it all back together. This will prevent me from ruining the ring gear with my vise. Crank her down. Now I can use a big breaker bar on it. Back to the vise. Okay, this thing gets torqued down to 89 foot-pounds. So there is not a sequence for doing this. You just basically torque them all down in any damn order you please. I'm just gonna start off. Let's see, I've torqued this one down, so I'm just gonna keep going around the circle. We're there. I'll just slap it back together. All right, let's wrap this up. If you recall, when I pulled the gear pack out last time, my reverse fork actually stayed down in here, my reverse selector. And that was because I left the reverse switch in here. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull it out now in order to make it easier to put everything back together. I would suggest, if you're doing this, to go ahead and pull that out first so it doesn't cause everything to fall apart. You're just gonna have to pull it out later to put it all back together. One side's got a really nice chamfer on it, as you can see, and basically you line that up with this ridge right here. The bolt, if I recall, is directly above this. That looks like all the parts that went inside, so now we're gonna have to clean up the case all the way around, apply some more Honda Bond, and then we can set the top back on. Okay, we've cleaned up the edges, scraped off all the old Honda Bond. I'm actually using Ultra Gray, which is a very similar product to the Honda Bond. I have a brand new tube of Honda Bond, but want to use this up before it totally dies. It should be fine. We haven't had any problems with leaking on it. Anyway, cleaned it up, added a nice little bead of it all the way around. Made sure it was sealing everywhere I needed it to seal. Gonna let it just set up just for a few seconds here. This right here tray can be a real bitch. Sometimes these things fall out. Usually a little dab of Honda Bond right down here in the corner holds it in place. I didn't have to do that for some miraculous reason. It's actually hanging out in there and not trying to fall out. So I am ready to flop this over. Without getting RTV all over me. There we go. The tricky part of this whole thing is always getting the shift forks to line up. and the bearings to go in. Invariably, I struggle and it doesn't go together absolutely as freaking easily as this one did. I feel like a hero. Cool. Wow, it's seating and everything. What did I not line up? Did I leave parts out? Oh my goodness. All right, so we're gonna take our snap ring, open it up. Ah, there we go. I just didn't open the snap ring, why not? We are together. One of the things about the snap ring is you can't really use normal snap ring pliers. They wanted to kind of ride inside. Duckbills usually work best. You can open up the snap ring nice and wide that way. Usually it won't click into place until I bolt everything together. Then I'll take the transmission, flip it over. That'll allow everything to kind of settle in place and it'll snap in place. So, time for some more parts to go on. If you recall, our bolts are reverse thread. So when you drop them in, there's a little arrow on there to tell you which direction you turn to tighten down. Once we get them all kind of snug down, we will torque them into place. There are a couple of braces. Hopefully you remember where they went. These are actually lifting loops on the front and rear of the transmission for getting it in and out of the car more easily. One bolt's longer. It goes back here to a long, there's like a long place on the casing. All the others, I believe, are the same length. And now to torque them all in place. The bolts get torqued to 20 foot-pounds, which is a lot less than the other ones were. So we're going to set our torque wrench. Make sure it's set for the right direction. I don't know if you saw me there torquing. It seemed to me like that was a lot more than 20 foot-pounds, and I was a little curious what was going on. It turns out my Tecton torque wrench only torques in clockwise, doesn't torque counterclockwise. Interesting. I'm gonna have to make a run down the shop and get a different torque wrench. Actually I can run over to Carter's house, borrow his torque wrench. But that's kind of crazy. A one-way torque wrench. Didn't know they existed. Glad I figured it out before I snapped the bolt off. So, got the transmission case all torqued back together after borrowing a torque wrench. Now it's time to install the rest of the stuff. We're going to go right here to the reverse gear. Where is that bolt? There it is. Hopefully I've got it lined up properly. If you recall, I lined it up with this bolt that's slightly off apparently. So I'm going to need to realign that. Next, we're going to install our little detent springs and balls to all of our shift rods. Next, we're going to install the countershaft speed sensor. A little bit of oil on the O-ring is not a bad idea. Don't forget our little spacer. Without the spacer, when you tighten this down, it's gonna grind your sensor right into third gear and probably break it. This is our retainer for our shifters. We're not gonna put that in quite yet. But next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna put in the shift mechanism. Now, just like the case, there's a little bit of Honda bond that goes around there, so we need to clean it up first and apply a little Honda bond. And now the retainer. I don't know why it doesn't get a crush washer. It just gets a little bit of Honda bond though. Our transmission is all buttoned up and ready to go back in the car. Now, something about this, every single bolt on here has a torque spec. What I'll do is, on the website, I will have a few pictures pointing out the individual bolts and what their torque specs actually are. You didn't see me do that. I'm actually going to go grab another torque wrench from work and come back and torque everything. Plus one of them, this one, is I'm going to torque that when I have it bolted to the motor. It'll be a lot easier to do that. Make sure you torque everything. All these bolts that use crush washers, you should use a fresh crush washer on those so that they don't leak. But basically, the only thing left to do is check for the thrust bearing dimension on the transmission. And if you come around to this side, I'll show you what that is. In this end of the case, there was what looked like to be a circlip, had a couple small holes in it, and that circlip is the thrust washer. And basically, with this differential driven all the way down, the bearing fully seated, and we'll do that at work, you need to come in with a feeler gauge and measure the gap between the differential and the case, and it needs to be to a particular spec. I believe it was 0 to 1/10 of an inch, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I'll write that down, and I'll show you a few pictures of me testing it. But basically, what happens is there's a special tool you use to make sure that the bearing is fully seated into the case, and then you're going to measure this gap right above here with a feeler gauge in order to make sure it's not too great. If it is too great, the differential is going to move around quite a bit, and it's actually going to damage the case at some point. It could also cause the ring gear and pinion gear not to mesh correctly and cause premature wear there as well. But anyway, our transmission is ready, loaded up with the LSD, and we are ready to... Wow, I don't think this is a Honda LSD. I'm going to check that out. Anyway, it's ready, loaded up with an LSD, and ready to install in our car. So we have plenty of traction with our new K24 and our Civic. Thanks for joining us here at VTEC Academy. Please subscribe down below. Actually, click on the bell symbol down there, and that'll give you notifications when there are new episodes. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll talk to you later. Bye.